story. So, welcome to my talk today. I'll be sharing my chapter in the Great Leadership Awakening, titled Finding Your Resiliency Superpowers. But first, let me introduce myself. I'm Mary E. Gregory, and I work for Live Nation Entertainment. This will not be a talk about how to get tickets to shows or Taylor Swift. I am a senior leader in corporate IT, and I report to the CIO, and I have now for almost 5 years. I have been with the company for my entire corporate career, starting at Ticketmaster in product management, moving to the House of Blues, working in their digital marketing department. And then I made the leap to IT in 2015. I started there in their newly forming program management office. And within 3 years, I was leading that PMO department as their director. And now I'm senior director. I have the pleasure of supporting all of our departments in IT, which include business technology, cloud infrastructure, fintech, data sciences, and our corporate partners in global procurement, venue IT, concerts, you name it. I make sure our strategic initiatives are prioritized and properly resourced. In my talk, I'll be discussing resiliency and as it shows up in life and how sometimes in the cracks of our experiences. I'll also let you know that I have been tested for my resiliency superpowers this morning because just trying to join the Zoom, all of a sudden my internet failed. And so I'm coming to you from my mobile phone, holding up my camera, and you know what? The show must go on. So here we go. So as I said, sometimes resiliency is in the cracks of our experiences. It may show up as failure. We may dismiss it. We may overlook it. We may brood over it. However, we all have a well of powerful experiences that look like failures or defeats, but they're really just the yellow bricks to the road of our resiliency superpowers. One that is unique to you, one that's unique to me, and I have many, and you have many, and one that allows us the opportunity to show up and accept today's challenges. Before my corporate career, I was an entrepreneur. I was the kid that sold love tests at elementary school. I would ask 10 questions about who the cutest boy was and who the most popular girl was, and you would buy these love tests for 10 cents. And at the end of the week, I'd do a raffle, and to win, what you would win was a pack of Now and Laters. And this was a very popular game I played, and eventually my operation was shut down because the principal got wind of the winnings that were appearing in teachers' classrooms and noticed an uptick in candy mischief. So my bad. But this entrepreneurial state of mind always stayed with me. But really what saved me in my youth was sports. I am tall and lanky, and I was as a young person in middle school. I was already 5'9", I'm 6'1" now. And the first year I tried out for a basketball team, I didn't make it, but I kept practicing every weekend. I showed up, went to all of the games. I cleaned the gym floor just to be there and to be around the players. And the next year, I made the team. So what I liked about sports was the rah-rah you would get from your coach when you succeeded. You'd also get that rah-rah when you failed. I felt like sports could be the most toxic experience you've ever had, but also like the greatest love affair. And you always knew that you could have another opportunity to succeed when you play sports. There's always another game. There's always another practice that you could show up to. And a failure never defined you. It encouraged you to try more, to work harder, maybe find a different angle, but to succeed. So when I finished college, my first job was actually working for myself, and I partnered with someone in the mortgage industry. It was then a few years later, by 2002, and the dawn of the mortgage crisis, was definitely wafting in the air, and felt like a light fog rolling in. And it was one that I didn't see. But slowly, loans were no longer getting funded. People with great credit couldn't get loans. Everything seemed upside down, and the entire economy slowly began to crumble. And everyone seemed to be touched by this mortgage crisis in some way, losing their homes, market crashing, banks going under. So, as this mortgage industry and economy meltdown was happening, um, the business that I had opened was failing, and we had to quickly pivot. And we got with an engineer, my husband, and said, "Hey, can you build us some distressed mortgage software? Let's get this to the loan modification companies to help people and lenders save their homes and submit their, you know, documentation to lenders because everyone was trying to do it, and we wanted to streamline that process." So we did that, and we were recognized by Entrepreneur Magazine, who said, "Hey, you are one of the very few companies in this industry that are pivoting and providing a service that people can use." So we took that win and went to New York, and we thought we're going to get funding for this little startup. And we were denied by every single investor we spoke to. And I wasn't sure if it was because I was the female CEO of the startup, um, if this was just not the right time. It definitely didn't feel like the right time, but especially for investors who were looking at the mortgage industry with not the most favorable lens. And one investor told me, "I've lost 40% of my portfolio. And if my wife even thinks or hears that I'm going to invest in a startup, she'll kill me." So we took that as a okay and went back to here in California and said, "Let's just be scrappy and try to make it work." But unfortunately, mortgage refinance companies and loan modification companies were getting shut down left and right. They just, there it was chaos. So we just couldn't scale, and I had to make a decision after running this company for 4 years what I needed to do for myself. Um, it was a bleak time, and I needed a rah rah, and there was no rah rah in sight. No coach, no one saying, "Come on, Mary, get back up." And I just really wasn't prepared for that. I had a lot of debt, business debt. I had a lot of resentment towards my business partners and people who sold toxic mortgages that got us in this situation in the first place. And but I didn't know that I was laying down these bricks of experience. So over these few years, my body had failed too. I was fully experiencing the vibrations of defeat through every meridian line in my body. And I was holding and storing that trauma over the past 4 years. And I was just 30 years old. So I pause it in my chapter and I say, why can't we see the greatness in our failures? Why can't we readily see them as an opportunity to try again? Taking the lessons learned from those experiences. And why is that so difficult? And I believe that it's because as we get older and as we transition away from receiving outward affirmations from others, we're not properly prepared for the positive affirmations that are needed from within. So we do what we're used to and we reflect out, judging others for the weaknesses that we see within ourselves. We usually don't know how to reflect on our own strengths, to soothe our soul with positive and affirming mantras that support us from within. So we have a hard time being our own rah rah cheerleader. So, what is resilience? Resilience is made up of five pillars: self awareness, mindfulness, self care, positive relationships, and purpose. Being resilient, though, does not mean a person doesn't experience stress, emotional upheaval, and suffering. But highly resilient people tend to possess common traits. They're accepting of the situation, they're purposeful, and they're flexible. They reappraise a difficult situation and look for meaningful opportunities within it. I like to call this hunting for silver lining. Now, the definition of psychological resilience is the ability to cope mentally and emotionally with a crisis or to return to pre crisis status quickly. Now, I don't know about you, but if you've ever been in a car accident, which I was in April of 2021, it takes a while to recover physically. But also, there's the mental component from that kind of event. And emotionally, just processing it, processing that fear that it may come up again, um, that anxiety that comes with it when you're back on the road, that that does take time because trauma is stored in the body and the nervous system. So we cannot forget that being able to release traumatic events requires the mind and the body. So to explore more about how that works, I'll be sharing with you guys later in this talk some techniques around somatic release. And somatic therapy is also called somatic experience therapy, and it's used to treat PTSD and other mental and emotional health issues through the connection of the mind and body. So this body centric approach, which I'm doing here before when I right before joining the call, obviously I was stressed out because I didn't have internet, but this is a calming technique right here where I'm touching a acupoint and I'm also holding my heart and it tells my nervous system that all is well. So I'm now regulating myself. So we have all of these techniques at our disposal, at our disposal. So what about the trauma you've experienced and how it shows up in your life today? So oftentimes these are experiences from our childhood, our young adult life, and of course, our adult life. When we show up with unresolved trauma, however, our approach to solving problems and receiving feedback, processing information, um, that's much different than if we have forgiven that past trauma. So we may carry around a sense that we failed in some way or have been failed, and that deteriorates our ability to see our unique strengths, our superpowers, and to tap into our resilience and to ultimately build our confidence. So I suggest that when looking at your life events that you may regret, ask yourself, who was I at that time? What experiences had I had up until that event? And then what was I experiencing at that moment? When my parents divorced, I was 6 years old. It completely changed my life. I was the youngest of three. I lived in Nashville, Tennessee. I lived in the suburbs. I had aunts, uncles, cousins, family. But then my dad came out, and it was the mid 80s. There was definitely less tolerance than there is today. And the fact that he was the preacher of our church did not help the matter any. And my mom was completely devastated. Um, and most folks didn't know how to support her. Um, there was a saying going around that, you know, she couldn't keep her man straight. A lot of women had to endure that. Um, but one day, after almost a year of this, trying to deal with it, them getting divorced. She packed the three of us kids into her 67 Dodge Dart, and we left Nashville, Tennessee. And I wanted to see my father or family for 13 years. And during that entire time, and until I got married, we lived below the poverty line. Um, and so what people saw of me, what I presented first was actually my facial deformity. I was born with a bilateral cleft lip and palate, and I had only had two surgeries before that time to close up my nose and the roof of my mouth and my lip. So I still needed to get teeth. I still needed additional surgeries because my nose was flat because I didn't have a bridge. Later, I would work on that, as you could see, but for those 13 years, I felt half baked. And so what was interesting was that though I showed up with this facial deformity, what most people showed me first was intolerance and judgment. I was presumed to be less than others. The judgment, I carried around this judgment for most of my young adult life until I was able to go through 10 plus years of reconstructive surgeries, um, my last one completing when I was 26 years old. So being bullied, being underestimated, um, I was angry at my parents. I was angry at those who bullied me. I was made to feel less than growing up. And I decided, though, and I'll share the experience, that I wanted to be carrying around experience and bringing that to the table than bringing around and showing up with baggage. And when I think of baggage, I think of all the unresolved trauma I had in my life, all the events that I had not forgiven and let go of. So when I was confronted with a workplace bully who made fun of me, who could see that it was my first corporate experience, I was vulnerable. What he showed me was bullying. And guess what? I was triggered again. It made me feel like that bullied child. And I saw that little girl in me, and she was still vulnerable, still showing up with unprocessed and unforgiven trauma. So I set out on a transformational journey. I found a personal development approach that worked for me. I rave about this book by Hal Elrod called The Miracle Morning, where you spend 1 hour in the morning before your day starts on personal development. You meditate, you journal, you exercise, you read affirmations. Within 30 days of doing this, I had quit my job and I started in IT. I was making $20,000 more per year. Um, and I decided to write my memoir. I had a lot that I needed to process. And so I went on that journey for several years, therapy, EMDR, sessions for PTSD. And when the pandemic hit, I was furloughed. And this ended up being a silver lining for me because at that time I had just been chipping away, sending 10 pages of edited work to two IT leaders. Thank you for being my accountability partners. Um, and they even told me, we're not reading what you send us, Mary. We want to wait for the final book. But it was really encouraging and helpful because it kept me on track. And within 3 months, I was able to publish my memoir titled Travels Through Aqua, Green, and Blue. And I felt really good about it. I had had 3 months now being furloughed to really focus on it and have proofreaders and have my family and friends read the manuscript and let me know if I got things right. Because I was a child when we left Nashville, and asked if people if they wanted to change their names, which everyone did. But that was no problem. It was a good book. And within that book and through therapy, I forgave my parents, my bullies, my siblings, and most importantly, myself. I saw the little girl that I was and what she went through and the choices that she had to make at the time. Um, and I forgave her for all of that. And I recognized my experiences. And through that, I looked at my failures and you know what? I owned them. These are now my experiences. I'm not carrying around that trauma anymore. So the way I'm showing up is very, very different. So all of our experiences are invaluable lessons in leadership. And what matters most is to give credit to those experiences. So my resiliency superpowers are fortitude, acceptance, and forgiveness. So I'm going to invite you to work with me here for a minute, and we're going to think about what your resiliency superpowers might be. So in your mind, think of some event that had a silver lining. It started out as a difficult situation, but you know it had a silver lining. And so we're going to think about that event while we're calming our nervous system. So you could do what I did, which is called the calming hand, if that's okay for you. Um, or one's called self hug. There are acupoints here. I would use both hands, but I'm holding up my phone. So you can hug yourself while you're thinking about this event, or you can hold on both of your fingers this acupoint right here on your index finger. So I invite you, you can close your eyes, think of this event that was difficult, but that you know had a positive outcome. Think about what you went through, that journey to the silver lining, the event, who you were at that time, and what that experience felt like at that time. And then see yourself having moved beyond that, who you are now, the wisdom that you gained from that experience. And sit with it. Recognize it as an experience and acknowledge it as part of your experience. You own this experience. You're thriving because of this experience. You're stronger from this experience. So I'm going to end my talk. You can continue holding your acupoints for this somatic release experience. And I'm going to read you a poem. I've never read this poem to others, and every time I read it to myself, I still cry. So I'm going to maybe have ugly tears, but I don't care. So, but I want to share this because I think it exemplifies the awareness and acknowledgement of the greatness of life's experiences. It's titled My Poem. My power comes from some well of stories and history about me, my evolution until now, and my predictions of tomorrow. My power is non categorical. It's not a talent, it's who I am. It's unique, a combination of things: a wink, a quirky gesture, a look, a style, a combination of raw feelings, a disposition, a curiosity, a kindness, a poem. Had I known that my power was me, a beautiful poem about the good, the bad, the defiant, the valiant, the passion, the words were my very own poem, written every day and treasured in every way, a story captivating, exhilarating. Had I known this is my poem, my powerful poem, I would have studied it, appreciated it as the work of art that it is. It's not some magazine look, some superficial universal look pleasing to the eye, internationally recognized. It's the getting to know me kind, to see the inner strength, the not so obvious beauty that takes time to read and understand. One so lovely that when you've read the story, you've understood the hurdles and triumphs, and your heart soars with possibilities and hope and happiness and sorrows. This poem is my power. The words, their meaning, their life that is mine comes from within to be shared and written. Had I known as a child that this poem was my power, not my talent, I could have spent my nights admiring the words, the stories, and the hope. I would have risen, I am rising, I will fall, and I will get back up over and over. And that is glorious, beautiful, more beautiful than talent or beauty itself. I would walk like a beautifully written poem, my poem, and seize it, own it, love me. Write your poem, little one. Begin at once. Share it and be proud of it. It's your story and it's still being written. Its ink is still wet. The verses are unfolding. This, your powerful poem. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here, for being open to hear about finding your resiliency superpowers and knowing that it begins with you and with forgiveness. Thank you.